Hi, welcome to Sheep Farm Podcasts, and with me and Chris tonight, and back for a third time, must be a glutton for punishment, is psychotherapist Jerry Marzinsky from the US, and we're also joined by Jenny Lynn from here in the good old damp, wet UK, who has also experienced these parasitic entities firsthand, as well as in her line of work as well. Jenny is an authority in her field of integrative psychotherapy and hypnotherapy, and she's a fellow of the National Council of Psychotherapists, supervisor for the Hypnotherapy Association, and a member of the General Hypnotherapy Register, and an individual member of the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. She's also been a member of the Buddhist lay organisation. I'm going to try and pronounce this now. keep getting grief for not being able to pronounce things right. Soka Gakkai International for 30 years. Is that right? Yep.
Yep.
Now, that's what I call a resume. It makes my education look like, a Yorkshire bloke who's just been down pit. Before we start, what I want to say is that COVID backwards is divuk. And divuk is a term derived from the Hebrew word dibuk, spelt D-Y-B-B-U-K. Now, me and Chris have mentioned this a few times in our podcast. And a dibuk, or a divok, is an evil spirit capable of possessing other creatures, and it's believed to be the suffering soul of the dead. Dibuks are believed to possess poorly evolved creatures. And that is a great lead into what we will be discussing tonight. This subject is one of those great mysteries, and at the same time resonates on so many levels with me, Chris, and the guys who we're on tonight, and so many other people. We had so many great comments about and thanking Jerry from the last podcast we did with him and George, and the one prior to that, for putting out this information into the ether and helping people put this phenomenon into some rational explanation for themselves and their loved ones that are suffering from it. With that, we're going to crack on, and welcome back, Jerry, and welcome, Jenny.
Nice to be here.
Good to be here. I didn't know Jenny had such a distinguished pedigree. I just knew she knew what she was talking about. She knows what she's talking about.
I feel inadequate now.
I didn't know that background. It's like, wow, man. National this, national that.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
That must be an old one. That must be an old resume that I've given you. I don't know when you got that, because
just showing off on it.
I am. It must have been, yeah.
Have you got new stuff on it now, Jenny?
Eh?
I don't know if you ever gave me a resume. Did you?
What's that?
I don't know if you ever gave me a resume. I met you and I went, well, she knows what she's talking about. That's all I need to know.
No, I don't know. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter, does it, at the end of the day?
I don't think I did, so it's like that's the first time I heard all your qualifications. I was like, whoa, listen to that.
I realised when Dom ran that out, I think that Dom's my divok.
Yeah.
Feed off my energy.
Or lack of it.
Yeah.
So, Jerry, you want to start off? We're going to cover some ground that we didn't cover in the last one, aren't we? A little bit.
Yeah. I just kind of want to, kind of lay an overview. Is I spent close to 40 years working on the front lines of mental health, and when I started work, it was at the largest psychiatric hospital probably in the world. I mean, there were like 10,000 patients in there. This place sprawled over 2,000 acres, had 200 buildings, and it was the size of a small city in Milledgeville, Georgia. And I was thrilled because I was an adrenaline junkie, and I was just, fascinated with mental illness and abnormal psychology. So shortly after starting there, I mean, I'd been taught in graduate school, I'm sure as Jenny has, that the voices that schizophrenics heard were hallucinations, and there was nothing else to it. I thought they were like, what do they call it? Word cabbage. It just didn't make any sense. They were just rambling, incoherent sentences, and in some cases they were. But, then I started hearing patients carrying on full conversations with their voices and arguments and actually arguing and fighting with them. And, I tried to listen in, and it was like one side of a telephone conversation where you could hear the person on the phone talking, but you couldn't hear who was coming in past that. So That struck me as odd. They're carrying on what appeared to be a coherent conversation with a hallucination. And everybody around me believed they were hallucinations too. I mean, all the staff, the psychiatrists, the psych nurses, everybody been brainwashed in school. These are hallucinations. They're not real. It's due to a chemical brain imbalance in their heads. And I started wondering about this chemical brain imbalance when I saw that never did a psychiatrist ever give any lab work, any blood work, any kind of test whatsoever to find out what was out of balance or how much. All they did was, it was almost like they got like a dartboard and went, this whole list of medicines and boom, through it, and they'd pick a antipsychotic med they thought would work, and they'd douse the person down with it, and then they'd call them back in a week. Well, how'd that work for you? Well, I hate it. And they'd switch it to another one until they got one that was awful, but, worked the best.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm laughing. I'm being sort of cynical laughing there, but
that's what they were doing. They were
licking the finger and hoping, aren't they? With the wind's blowing.
Yeah. Jenny's experienced it, so it was like a chemical lobotomy. It basically numbed these people out so they didn't cause any problems. That's what it was for. It wasn't to cure anything. It wasn't to treat anything. It was to numb them down so they didn't cause problems. Mm-hmm. So I started asking questions about, well, how do you know what's out of balance and by how much if you don't have any tests? Oh, the drug companies tell us what the deal is. And the drug companies, that's like, letting the fox in the hen house. So the psychiatrist didn't have any research about a chemical imbalance theory whatsoever. I mean, they were just trusting the drug companies and what they were taught in graduate school. Then I found out, after doing some research, they have no tests for a chemical imbalance. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. They're just saying that. And it's been disproven over and over and over again, and they're still pushing it. Even today in the Mayo Clinic, you look at the advertisements and it goes, we don't know what causes schizophrenia, but research indicates that it is due to a chemical brain imbalance, and then they'd start spouting all these lies to sell their drugs. So basically, they're not interested in curing anybody or looking for a solution. Matter of fact, the National Institute of Mental Health here has reduced funding for schizophrenia research to almost a pittance. What they're interested in doing is making money selling these toxic drugs which rot out the patient's brain, and they rot out their peripheral nervous system. So when researchers started doing autopsies on long-term schizophrenics that were in mental hospitals, they found their brains were shrunken like walnuts. And they published that, and they said, hey, what about this? And in come the pharmaceutical industry and the psychiatric mafia going, oh, don't worry about it. It's due to the schizophrenia. Whatever the schizophrenia is, that's causing it, so don't worry about it. So they started feeding these antipsychotic drugs to monkeys and rats, and they found out that their brains shrunk also. And then when they tried to publish that research, it was blocked by the chemical companies. It was blocked by education, who wouldn't print it in any journals, and they had a hard time getting it out. They didn't want people to know that these drugs actually destroy the brain of schizophrenics and whoever else they'd given it to. And now they're giving it to thousands upon thousands of kids. Because the kids are acting out and they're hyperactive, they give them these major tranquilizers that are actually destroying their brains. This is unconscionable what they're doing, just to make money selling their toxic drugs. And they sell them in the United States to stay sane in the United States on these drugs with $800 to $1,000 a month. You go across the border to Mexico, you can get the same prescription from the same company for $75 a month. They are just robbing the people here blind and driving up the cost of medical services just astronomically. And they go, oh, well, we had to spend millions of years researching all this stuff and billions of dollars to research. No, antipsychotic drugs were found by accident in a dye factory in France, I believe it was, back in the late 1800s. And then they tested it on the mental hospitals here, and it numbed these guys out, shut them up. They didn't beat each other up. They calmed right down. So that was it. Psychiatry, that was the stepchild of the medical system latched onto that like their lives depended on it. And now they got something that actually worked temporarily, as long as you took it and rotted your brain out with it.
Yeah, it depends
And they
what you
started,
mean by work as well, doesn't it?
well,
Depends what definition of worked is as well, doesn't it? Because
it beat stuffing these guys into straitjackets.
Yeah,
There were some nasty fights at the state hospital trying to stuff these guys in the straitjackets in the early days.
I pulled a few figures out. The antidepressant market from 2019 to 2020 went up about 15 billion worldwide. Just the antidepressant market, not any other drug, just that drug alone. And I reckon that's underplaying it as well a bit.
and they barely work better than placebos.
Yeah.
And then there's warnings on what is it? Paxil is it? That warn of suicidal ideation.
That's how well they work.
That's how well it works. Now the total income of psychiatry and the big pharma industry together in a year selling these antipsychotic drugs around the world is $235 billion. That's all they care about is the money.
Would you say then? I suppose it's a question to both of you, but this seems like some worldwide experiment because they know it doesn't work. Someone somewhere knows that these things don't work how we perceive them.
It's a dumbing down. It's a chemical kosh, a dumbing down of consciousness, and the DSM. Manuals, the data statistical manuals, usually that's an American publication, has been through, I think, 5 iterations since the 1950s, and each year gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And basically, they just vote in on a raised hands basis which symptoms they're going to classify as which disease, so that they can prescribe more drugs. So basically, they have to keep with the lie that it's a mental a chemical imbalance, because that's the source of their income, and it dumbs people down. The drugs just dumb everybody down. When I know Jerry says sometimes you need a drug to reach your patient, which I think you probably is true, but I find when patients are heavily addicted to antidepressants, it's very hard to reach them. They're not doing their work. They can't feel the pain. There's no need to do their work. They know they're not happy, but they're not unhappy enough to really dig deep and do their work. So I find it just dumbs everybody down, paralyzes the conscious mind, and just keeps everyone enslaved to big pharma.
Well, I was talking about the antipsychotic drugs, but I agree with you on the antidepressants. And some of those are so addictive that when the person tries to get off, they just can't. Yeah. So they have to keep going back to the psychiatrist for prescriptions because they say, I can't get off them. I can't function. I feel miserable. My system starts falling apart.
Well, why don't you tell? We're supposed to feel emotions.
Yeah.
And antidepressants stop me feeling any emotions. We're supposed to feel pain. That creates our life and as being, doesn't it? It creates everything we are.
Yeah, that's your personal
Jenny,
growth,
tell them what
it
it felt like to be on those antipsychotic drugs.
Yeah, I mean, the antipsychotics, we are talking... Oh, I was 23, I'm 57, so it's a lot of years ago, and I haven't taken one since. But I remember being, excuse me, paralysed, literally physically paralysed, like you're in a straitjacket, but my head was racing. So that was the very first drug they put me on. I think it was Largactil, or could it have been Librium? I can't remember. Whichever it was. I've got my medical notes around somewhere.
Don't worry about it. They're all basically the same. Yeah. Did it get rid of the voices or?
No, not at all. Not at all. No. I mean, the fear was horrendous. I just remember being in quite a lot of terror, really, at the time. And this was the very first week that I was there. I was literally paralysed with these drugs, really in a lot of fear, a lot of terror. And the pictures that I had in my head and what I thought people were saying to me, which they weren't, and when people would come up to me, I'd think they were about to, clock me one, or it was a state of total meltdown, red alert, because you couldn't trust anyone with anything. And that was the sensation, the first sensation I had on these particular drugs. They changed them, might have been a fortnight in. I think what they tend to do, like Jerry said, they just throw a dart at the board and think, well, we'll put the most paralyzing drug into them just to calm them down. It's not calming you down, it's just making you physically incapacitated so they can start to observe you. And it's only then, after a couple of weeks, that they start to change the dosage or they start to change the drugs. So they put me on something else. And I called the next lot I was on my uppers and downers. So they just kept me high, those ones. I was just running around like a mad thing. I'm 5'7" and I went down to about 8 stone. I was tiny, skinny little thing over the time. But yeah, the drugs are just horrendous.
And Jenny, what was your first experiences with psychiatry when they first committed you in there? How long did he spend with you before he started, okay, we're going to put you on this stuff? Did they tell you about any of the side effects or what to watch out for or how dangerous these drugs were?
No.
What was your experience with them like?
You're not considered compos mentis, so they're not going to consult you because you aren't considered to be in your right mind. And you can't make a decision, and you can't really easily. It's impossible. You're in a state of abject fear, like I described in one of our interviews recently, Jerry. I was on the run mentally and physically. It feels like I'm running. I'm trying to run away from something, and you're not in any fit state to really understand what they're saying to you.
I'm just reading the side effects here of very common side effects. 1 in 10 people, so that's quite a low. You can't control your movements, mainly tongue, mouth, jaw, arms, legs, trembling, muscle stiffness or spasms, slow movement, producing more saliva than usual, feeling restless, seizures, alteration to heart rhythm. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on.
Sexual dysfunction, adedynia.
Literally hundreds here.
Yeah.
It's quite horrific just watching that, just looking at that.
In my entire career, I have never seen a psychiatrist sit down with a patient and say, listen, watch out for these side effects. These are dangerous. If you hit these particular neurological effects, let me know. What they did in the state hospital instead, once that neurological damage started and the neurological symptoms began with the shaking and the tongue darting and on like that, then they put cogentin on top of these drugs that were already rotting out their nervous system to mask the side effects so they didn't experience them. And they continued on those meds as they rotted out their brains and the nervous systems. And they're doing that today. I don't...
Well, I mean, in fairness, Jerry, we're seeing this mass worldwide medication being handed out like confetti at this minute in time. It shouldn't really surprise us that people who are vulnerable are getting battered the way you guys are telling us they're getting battered when they're actually basically in prison, aren't they?
Yep, virtually. And like Jenny said, you have no rights. They won't listen to you, because you're crazy, and you're irresponsible, and they treat you like less than human.
Yeah.
It's like they're the gods and you're the slaves, and you will do what they say or they'll lock you up. They'll put you in.
It is like something out of the 19th century, like straitjackets. They've just replaced straitjackets with chemical straitjackets. The treatment's the same. You're still locked away like some mad person,
Boris Johnson's mother passed away a few weeks ago. And me and Christian, when we did our presentations on the Johnson family, she was put into a psychiatric ward. And I think she had electric shock treatment.
That's another one.
I think the rumour was. And so you can tell, if she's had electric shock treatment, the chances are she's been heavily sedated as well, hasn't she? So, on various copious amounts of drugs.
I told you what those look like, right? Didn't I explain to you?
Yeah. Pretty horrendous, aren't they?
I almost fainted. I mean, I got a strong stomach, but I had to grab the column as I was leaving. It was just so horrendous. I mean, and all that does is it stuns their brain for a week or two. And they walk around like, and it's the attendants that make those decisions. Oh, this guy's causing a lot of trouble. He needs another shock treatment. And then the psychiatrist administer it. The guy walks around. You can see the neurological damage after just one of those shock treatments.
Yeah. A friend of mine, and I mentioned this before, a friend of mine's dad, he had electric shock treatments, and then they let him out and put him in one of these like halfway houses type places. And he was basically, there was nothing left of him. He'd been in there 2 or 3 years at least. I think it was longer than that. He didn't last much longer, to be fair. He passed away. I think he passed away for about a year of being out. But he'd lost loads of weight, like Jenny was explaining. So, yeah, I think we're going to go before we kick off and go real deep into Jenny's story, have a look at these patterns, won't we? We're going to talk over the general throughout, and then we'll discuss them in more depth later on.
Well, let's talk about the voices a little bit first.
Okay,
psychiatry insists that the voices are hallucinations.
Right.
And when I got to the state hospital, nobody was curious about what these voices were telling these people. It's like, oh, they're nuts. They're hearing these voices. That's what they do. They're just hallucinations. They don't make any sense. And I'm like, nobody except me was curious about what these voices were telling these people. And so I started asking them. And I found some of them got upset when I started asking them about their voices. And they didn't trust psychologists. They didn't trust the staff, because what had happened to them previous to that is, as soon as somebody started asking, "You hearing voices?" Yeah, I'm hearing voices. What are they telling you? Well, they're telling me to kill myself. They lock them up in a padded cell. They put them on suicide watch, a stripped down cell with nothing that they can hurt themselves with. Bare bone bed, and they lock them in there until they're not suicidal anymore, and douse them down with drugs. So, I was just real curious about what these voices were saying. So I started asking them. Some of them got upset. They told the psychiatrist. I ended up in front of the medical director's office with him telling me these voices are hallucinations. And you're asking them questions about them. You are reinforcing their hallucinations, and you are making them worse by asking them questions about what the voices are telling them. I want you to stop it. And they ordered me to stop it. That happened twice at the state hospital with 2 different psychiatrists. They won't even let you investigate what the voices are saying. And I saw no evidence that asking them questions about their voices made them worse. Some of them got upset, and, they'd walk away. They wouldn't attack you or anything like that. At the very worst, they wouldn't cooperate because they didn't trust you. But what I found is that every tidbit of what I found that they told me about the voices, the next time I could found a patient I could talk to, I'd say, well, this is what I know about the voices so far. Can you tell me anything more? And just having that little bit of information, they would add more. So it took a few years before I had enough to, okay, I know this much, and then they would add more if they trusted you. But the hard part is how they're treated once, and Jenny could verify this. Once you're diagnosed, they start hearing voices. They tell their friends. Their friends are freaked out. They leave. They go, this person's possessed. They're weird. They're hearing voices telling them all this crap. And so they lose their friends. Then they tell their families, and they start withdrawing into their room. They don't want anything to do with their families, and they start causing problems. And they hear them arguing in their bedrooms with the whatever it is. So they take them to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist said, "Yeah, you hearing voices?" "Yeah." And okay, well, you're schizophrenic, man. Take these drugs. There's no cure. You're going to have to take these for the rest of your life. And that's it. They're off and running, and they can't stand those drugs, so they take them for a month or 2, and then they go off and they relapse again, and that cycle goes over and over and over again. And that's the state of our mental health system is in the Western world right now. They put them on these drugs. They say, you stay on these drugs. They hate those drugs. They go off them. They go psychotic again. They end up back in the hospital again. It's another $10,000 for the admission. The psychiatrists are making a fortune. The psych hospitals are making a fortune. The insurance companies are getting ripped. And it's just this giant merry-go-round that goes round and round and round. So the more I learned about the voices, the more I found that they were running these patterns. And it is the voices that causes paranoid schizophrenia. They are the cause. They are the driving force behind it. It's not no chemical imbalance. It's not any genetic anything. There is a one-to-one correlation between horrendous physical, mental, and sexual abuse and the use of meth. Okay, those things are constant. It's like they're there. You can talk to almost any schizophrenic, and they'll have suffered.
When you say meth, can you just be a bit clearer on the types of drugs that you mean by that?
Meth is I've seen more prisoners go psychotic on meth and come through the ER psychotic on meth than any other drug out there.
So amphetamine.
It's amphetamine. It does something to the cocaine will do it. I mean, I've seen a fair amount come through on cocaine, but meth is the number one. The heroin? Prisoners called it the devil's drug. No, heroin. No. Heroin calms people down.
Right.
And a lot of schizophrenics will take heroin just to calm down because these voices are horrendous. Jenny could tell you about what they're like. You want to say something about what it was like dealing with those things when they hit you, the voices, Jenny?
It's we've talked about this before, haven't we, Jerry? But I didn't hear clear instructions, clear voices. I remember various incidences where, there was the priest that came in to administer some benefaction, and he was standing in front of me with his hand on my stomach and a hand on my back, and all I could hear was F you, F you, F you, F you, like heinous, horrible language coming from this priest. And Jerry's convinced that was, perhaps the voices. I wonder whether these priests are as much,
casting spells.
Casting spells, and after the souls of the vulnerable in hospital as well. Yeah. But no, there was always this sense of being on the run. It was like there was terror, fear. I couldn't turn around and face whatever it was that was chasing me. I couldn't. I had all these ideas that were in my head about how I should and shouldn't be in the world. And so, for example, I couldn't get in a bath full of water because what was going on in my head was if I put my foot in the water, then I'm going to be electrocuted because I mustn't cross the water. And I think crossing the water was also something to do with Stig, some kind of old shamanic story about crossing...
River Styx.
Styx, that's the one, the Styx. Crossing the water to the other side meant departing this life and going over to the other side. Something like that. And I definitely had that going on in my head constantly. I couldn't get in the water. So obviously you walk around stinking because you just can't shower, you can't bath, which is another way, I suppose, that it keeps people away from you. They want you. They don't want anyone else interfering with you. So
it's a strange one, because some of the treatments we do in our clinic, I went through a phase where I didn't want to have the treatments, even though I knew they were being beneficial to me. There was something inside me talking me out, and it was parasitical, I know it was, talking me out of actually physically having this. I had to force myself to have the treatments, even because I'd had some, and everything had got a lot better. And then, anyway, so it's a similar sort of conversation, isn't it, as you with the water, really? It's just slightly different, which is, again, it's sort of outside this psychotic or the schizophrenic sort of scenario, but it's still the same controlling element, isn't it? Something that's beneficial, you can't have.
You've been convinced not to do something beneficial.
Exactly, yes, yeah.
And something Jerry and I learned last Monday week, I think, with a guy called Phoenix Aurelius, is that who's quite a spiritual alternative guy, and he's saying that sprites and spirits and unnamed and unseen, the unseen is around us everywhere.
Yes.
And it's all vying for your attention, and everyone is susceptible to these unseen forces. It's just a matter of degree as to whether they manage to capture their host, and take over.
Yeah.
But a lot of us are walking the line all of the time, thinking the thoughts that are in our heads are ours, when in fact they're being planted there most of the time.
So
That's right.
if you think of your aura and it's like a human Wi-Fi which has been destroyed right now, or certainly been detuned. Do you think that's allowing these things easier access? When I use the word things, like drugs will alter your aura, won't they? You know, the whole thing, and then these things, which is probably like your firewall, if you like, if I'm basing it on a computer, allowing these things to interact and control you from outside in.
Yeah, that's how meth works. It destroys the firewall.
Yeah.
You know, and the people using it, they feel like Superman. It makes them feel great. They come down and you know, they crash. And then at some point they start hearing voices. Now, like Jenny said, you know, they don't sound like, you know, a lot of them don't sound like something outside of you. When I prayed to hear them, the one time I did, it sounded just like my thoughts, you know, the thousands of my thoughts that run through my head every day, but the intent was 180 degrees different. They sound just like your thoughts, but the intent and the content is very different from how you normally think. In Jenny's cases, it'd be like, oh, that guy's going to hurt you, or somebody's chasing you, or don't trust that doctor. These are thoughts that sound just like the regular thoughts that run through her head, but they're not from her. You know, and that's the problem. People think that all your thoughts belong to you. Emanuel Swedenborg, 700 years ago, he pointed out clearly that most of your thoughts don't belong to you.
Yeah,
they come in from elsewhere.
And that was 700 years ago.
Have you come across Rupert Sheldrake's dogs who know when their owners are coming home or something? Mm-hmm. So, you know, we think the thoughts are inside our head, but they're out in the field. And they showed these videos. I don't know if you've ever seen them, Dom and
I've
Sherry.
Yeah.
Kristen, you know, where the minute the person out decides to return to their home, like the moment the dogs start jumping up and down at the door, can't wait to see them.
They had a camera on both of them, and it was when he was at work. As soon as he made the decision, no matter what time it was, the dog jumped up.
So, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
I've got 2 dogs here, and when my wife is you know, way beyond hearing range, both of them get up and they're going to the door. They know. Yeah, they know. So, yeah, that's a big mistake. People think that every thought that comes into your head belongs to you. It does not. They're not your thoughts, especially with schizophrenia. Those thoughts they don't belong to the person. They belong to other entities that are parasitic and drain their energy. So in order to drain that energy, they can only feed on negative emotional energy. They can't create their own energy. You know, and so what they did is fill their heads with paranoia and negative thoughts, and they're consistently negative. If they were a hallucination, why are they consistently negative? Hallucinations are negative, positive, neutral. They're all over the place. The voices are consistently, unswervingly negative and create paranoia, and they say horrible things about the person. They say don't trust anybody, don't talk to anybody, don't tell anybody about us, the voices. You know, go in your room and lock yourself in there. They want the person to isolate. So, but if they were hallucinations, like friggin' psychiatry insists, they wouldn't run patterns. And negativity is one of their biggest number one patterns. They're all consistently negative. You talk to a schizophrenic and they'll tell you that you're no good, you're rotten, nobody loves you, your parents hate you, your girlfriend is cheating on you, you're out of just lie after lie after lie after lie. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. What they're after is that negative emotional reaction. And then when you talk to the schizophrenics afterward, they're drained. You know, and they don't know where their energy goes. You know, I was asking them that even in the state hospital. I found that there was a one-to-one correspondence between the voices attacking the person and them being emotionally and energetically drained. After the voices attacked them, they had no energy left. They couldn't even get up for breakfast. They couldn't even get out of bed. You know, and that was
it does make you wonder. You know, if you have a bad day and you feel drained and you can't get out of bed and you can't move.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never tried to make that link before, but if you maybe could make that link, maybe your bad day might revolve around things that are talking to you in your head.
Yeah. Or you know how you remunerate about something going wrong? You screwed something up and you go, oh, God darn, I shouldn't have done that. No, now this, and then this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it just goes round and round and round and round. That doesn't happen with animals. It only happens with humans.
Yeah.
That's them in there pouring gasoline on the fire and sucking that negative energy from you. And they hit us all.
There was a good book written, I think it was called something like Zebras Don't Get Ulcers or something like that. And that basically, for all their life, they're chased by lions or wherever, and a watering hole could get eaten any minute by a crocodile. They're just living total terror, but it's natural terror to them, and they don't get ill from anxiety and things like that. Yet humans, our world is just fear-based, fight or flight, constant, isn't it? Everything we do, you watch a film, it's all killing and murder. You watch anything on TV, this supposed reality, it's all negative. Even if the intent's good, the actual spell that's cast is negative because the connotations behind it all are just nonsense. So they lull you into a false sense of security as well. So everybody's surrounded by this negative force, aren't they?
They are. And look at the violence on TV, in the movies. And they go, oh, well, violence sells, But look what they're programming. I mean, look at the murder rate. It's soaring. And they're wondering where it comes from. After, by the time a kid gets to be a teenager, he's watched like 30,000 murders on TV. And that's what they're programming people with.
Yeah. I'm being a participant in war games on a PlayStation or an Xbox as well, which just makes killing fun.
Yeah.
Which is you get that blank look when they come off the game as well, like Christian's got.
And the thing is, they know it causes this. They know that this kind of stuff incites violence, and it's teaching kids like this is the way you handle situations. You pull out a gun and you shoot somebody. That's what they're teaching people, and then they wonder why. Oh, why are our prisons full? Oh my heaven! It's crazy.
It's like knife crime. They're going about knife crime in England. And my little girl went to Legoland the other day for kids. She's only 3, and she came back with a sword. And you just think, they're telling us that swords and knives are bad. The kids just come on with a little toy. So I know it's only a toy, but it's still the same thing, isn't it? You're still telling them that's all right.
Same thing.
But the connotation there. Go on, sorry, Jenny.
I was just going to say, I remember listening a number of years ago now to a satanic ritual abuse survivor, Penny. I think her name was Blackberry, and she'd been deeply traumatized. She described how she'd been systematically drowned and then resuscitated, and on a regular basis when she was lower than the age of 6. You might want to edit this bit out. But the point being was, she said after many, many years of enslavement in SRA, doing all the things that she was ordered to do under all of these different personalities that she developed in order to stay alive, I remember her saying the whole world is tarnished with satanic intent. Everything we think is real and normal is based in corruption and satanic abuse. And I mean, it was quite depressing when she said it, because she said it with such an honest, clear, resignation on her face, like, well, of course. Didn't
you know it was like that? But a lot of the research me and Chris have done into people like Blair and Johnson and a lot of the other people, even Schwab, they've all been to these schools where ritualistic abuse was handed out for fun, and these are the people leading the show. These are the people. They're at the front of the camera leading the show. They're not necessarily leading it, but is it any wonder that sort of energy is then portrayed onto everybody else? So the patterns, Jerry.
Well, as we're going through these patterns, these are the patterns that the schizophrenic voices run. But take that and compare it to the messages that we're getting from the mainstream media and the politicians today.
And so, the big businessmen like Gates and people like that, and the health
the deep state
ministers, and Fauci and the Sith Witty. And he does look like the Sith, doesn't he? The Lord Sith. Valance is another one. Van Tam. You won't know Van Tam, but we showed his grandfather was the Prime Minister of Vietnam. Yeah. So his grandfather was locked up for abusing the Vietnamese and then released by the French and then put into power. Yeah, exactly. And he's the one handing out the arm spears for children now.
Look at friggin' Biden and these fools we have in Newsom just cheated on another election in California with the mail-in ballots again. Cheated his way into power again.
Beyond, yeah.
And now the Arizona election, beyond all doubt, has been proved to be fraudulent, and the governor will not decertify the vote. So he has certified a fraudulent election. Now, I don't know how that's going to fly. I don't think it's going to fly very well.
There'll be a few people stood outside the court steps, I think, or his office steps. But anyway, these people are being run by something, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
The clarity, 4 of us here could make better rational decisions based around even just the information we've got now than these people in power who've got all the information. Because some of the things they're saying, it's like listening to my niece playing. She makes more sense.
Why do you have to drag my daughter into it?
Because she's the youngest out of the lot of us. All right, listening to Christian.
Started on her already.
Listening to Christian, she talks more sense than him.
Well, he's on you today, ain't he?
Could I just ask you quickly, as a little intro, mate? I've got a friend I work with. He's a really lovely guy. He's only in his early 20s, mid-20s. And he was a cocaine addict. And I talked about it was last week before we did this. And I asked him, I got talking to him about it. And he ended up going to rehab. He's okay now, but he had quite a bad addiction problem. And I was explaining what the previous interviews we've done. And I asked him, I said, have you witnessed anything, or is there anything you'd like me to ask, or some patterns that have you seen? And he said, oh, yeah, I saw all sorts. He said, it's unbelievable. And he wrote me a few things down. He said footsteps were a big one, approaching footsteps. He's seen people out of the corner of his eye, i.e. like your shadow people. He said him and his friend once sat in a room and there was a massive flash inside the room. And he said it came from in the interior of the room because everything was shut off. And they both saw it at the same time. And he said whispers as well in his ear, not being able to move where he was paralyzed, he couldn't move. But this was the interesting one. He told me that he had fishing hooks flying at him and trying to drag him. And he was trying to get out of the way of these fishing hooks. Now, the way this is interesting is years and years and years ago, when I was a kid, a friend of mine took some acid, and he saw fishing hooks coming for him, trying to drag him. And I just thought it was interesting that these two people, totally unrelated, 30 years apart, had the same vision of these fishing hooks flying at him, trying to drag him into somewhere.
Well, that's interesting because of the voices due to the schizophrenics. I mean, it's like they're fishing. They have access to your entire memory. They can go in there, they can pick out all the awful things you've ever done, and they'll take it, and it's like a fisherman baiting a hook. They'll take that and they'll throw it into your head, and they'll fish for it and see if you'll bite on it,
Right.
And
you told us that fishing story where the voices told him to go fishing.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, but that was physical fishing.
I'm just wondering if there's a connection or a relevance there.
Well, I think the relevant is the voices actually fish for a reaction, so they have access to your entire memory. They can bait their hook with, oh, he did this. Let's see if we can bring that back. And I've had patients tell me that the voices brought up stuff they forgot 2 decades ago. And they're throwing it in their face and trying to get them upset with it. So it's almost like they bait the hook with these thoughts of guilt that you have deep down, and they'll throw it in there. That thought will hit, and they'll see if you'll bite on it. And if you bite on it, they'll pour gasoline on it and feed the fire. Yeah.
This is why I think personally, the way through any of this is to practice deep self-forgiveness. You have to deal with your unresolved issues. Yes. And forgive yourself. You're human. You've been interfered with. It's not your fault. Forgive yourself. So I know in my case, And it's been probably 20 plus years since I went through this kind of life-changing epiphany. I mean, I've had them before and since, but this one particular one was all about just letting go of all of the anger and rage in my life against perceived slights and hurts and whatever. They just evaporated. And from that moment on, I was completely free. I didn't have to feel bad about anything. And if I did something wrong, I just apologized and took stock, and I carried on. So you stop storing past hurts, you stop storing the hurt, stop storing the trauma and the anger and the resentment. And then these nasty entities can't hang on. They just can't get hold of you, because no matter how hard they try, there's nothing in there that's
they feed on that garbage.
Yeah. They want something sticky to get their hooks into, literally.
Right. So if you have all this garbage in there, you got to get it out. You got to forgive yourself. I mean, you got to forgive other people that have hurt you.
George talked about a similar thing, Jerry, didn't he? Where he said he had to cleanse himself to stop him from virtually sticking to him, like he said, Jerry. Yeah.
Right. Right. See, that they'll feed on that. So the number one thing is negativity. That's consistent. And why would a hallucination be constantly negative? They should be all over the place. The second one is they're anti-religious. They complain when the person reads the Bible. They don't like it. They go crazy when they go into a church. They don't like them being around preachers. They hate the 23rd Psalm. I've had several patients tell me that when they read the 23rd Psalm, the voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. Why would a hallucination care about the Bible or going to church or the 23rd Psalm? Why would a hallucination even give a crap about that stuff? But
the irony is, sorry, Jerry, just on that point there, the negativity of the anti-religious, could that be spiritual as well, not just religious as in a biblical type sense? Could it just be...
it could be Hindu. It could be the Quran. Any spiritual stuff they don't like. But boy,
any balancing element.
But boy, they hate the 23rd Psalm. They hate it.
Right?
Is that's the Valley of Death one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think
that's
I
the Valley.
Last time we talked. Yeah.
I haven't seen a stronger reaction to anything except exposing them as parasites. When you go to tell the patient that they're parasites and they're sucking their energy, the voices go nuts. They go nuts. They do everything to block that information from the patient. Because if you had a leech on you and somebody said, "Hey, that's a leech, it's sucking your blood," you're not going to just sit there and stare at it. You're going to try to get rid of it. But they can't make the connection between their energy disappearing and the voices attacking. I saw that at the state hospital. I'd ask them, every time, the voices have come, 10,000 times since they started coming. Every time that they come, your energy vanishes. And I'd ask the patient, where does it go? And you know what they said? I don't know. Very few of them made the connection. So it's like they're being blocked from making that connection. And if you make it for them, the voices go off. They go crazy. They'll tell the person to leave or to run or to start screaming, or they do not want the patient to have that information.
I bet Jenny sees a lot of people with chronic fatigue, which is quite a phenomenon as well. And that has got to be linked to that, hasn't it, Jenny?
Definitely. I mean, what you find, just briefly, just as a side, I suppose, is what you find is a lot of people with chronic fatigue have unaddressed trauma. So they've trauma somewhere in their life. They believe they've overcome it, but actually it's all of their behaviours are around trying to avoid hurting or upsetting anyone ever again, never drawing the same kind of condemnation or trauma to them ever again. And as a result, they're very adaptive personalities. So they've adapted to try and keep earning the love and affection that they want. And of course, eventually they can't, because they just get so exhausted. Like I think I described to you two guys last week, the potters, the clay has to be central on the potter's wheel. Otherwise, it goes all over the place. And what you find with chronic fatiguers is that the clay's never central. So they're spending all this energy trying to keep it more or less central, and eventually they're just exhausted. But what you'll find is the kind of mind games that they play with themselves can get really, really intense. But I would think if we go over to, the voices, they're having a field day.
Yeah.
They're having a field day,
Yeah, and I had voices, but not necessarily the schizophrenic type, like you said, where they were telling me to do things, but more noise in the head. And I used to say to Christian, "Don't you get all that noise?" Didn't I, Chris?
Yeah, he said, I found a way to get rid of all the noise in your head. When you have that noise in your head, I said, I don't have any noise in my head. And he's like, no, it's like a constant chattering. And I'm like, Dom, I don't get that. you just presumed everybody had it.
Ironically, it was one of the main things was a lot of meditation, but real meditation with acknowledging the thoughts were there type of stuff. And also the parasite cleanse. As soon as we started seeing these things leave our systems, it were like an exorcism, and the voices just went. That's all I can explain. So I think there's a physical part to it that's inside us, like a connective part that's connecting to these whatever entities outside that allows them to interfere.
No one will have done a parasite cleanse on a schizophrenic, will they? That would have even been included in there.
Most people who are ill are toxic, aren't they? And so there
more
will be
toxic,
heavy metals because they need conductivity and etc. Yeah. All right. Sorry, Jerry. We derailed again, then, didn't we? We're an hour in, and we've got to point 2.
Well, we covered they foster and create negative emotion. I mean, they do that. They energetically drain their victims. And what's interesting about the human brain is it produces ethereal energy, and it produces. Their non-physical part, the thoughts, the thinking, and the physical part. So where ethereal energy is turned into physical energy, where you have a thought and you build something, or you have a thought and then you turn it into physical energy, you do something. But it's the brain that produces that energy. So that's what they're after. They're after that ethereal energy, and it is energy. A thought is energy.
Prince Charles, sorry, but isn't he related to Dracula, Prince Charles?
Yeah,
and the blood-sucking vampire. That's quite a satanic thing. What you're explaining there,
it's the exact same thing.
Sounds satanic to me. That the energetically drained victims. I mean, you're not getting much more satanic than that, are you? Surely.
Right. And I think that's why Dracula has such an impact, because subconsciously, this is actually happening with these entities, and when they bring it out into the physical, like they're sucking your blood, they're sucking your life blood, but they're doing the same thing, but they're sucking your life energy.
And now we're seeing it on a mass scale.
The essence of you, aren't they?
The essence of you,
Yeah.
And schizophrenics, after these things attack, they're drained. They just lay in bed and they're just drained, and for the most part, they can't figure out where their energy went, and they don't even think about it. And for years I thought it was the anxiety, until a situation when the prison came along to prove to me that it wasn't the anxiety. And then it was like, okay, then what is it? And that's what it was, and I did a bunch of experiments that showed that, yeah, it was. Another thing that happens that's a pattern is they get louder after sunset, and they have something called, what is it? The something syndrome that old people get. What is it, Jenny? That sundowners syndrome. That all these old people in the old folks' home, when the sun goes down, they start getting crazy. So the voices get louder after sunset. And
so
the other
if we
time,
just tie that, if you tie that in with the mainstream media, that's when. That's when the MSM is getting mainstream media is getting the most attention,
louder
isn't it?
and louder.
Yeah, around 6 o'clock or so, they come on and start their crap. That I never thought about that before, but that's true.
Yeah, it's a good.
They come on around sunset after work when things are starting to settle down, and then they poison your brain.
And then they play it all the way through the night as well.
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah, all through the night. So,
which is, again, vampiric, isn't it? Vampires come out at night.
Me and my wife found that on full moons,
Yeah.
We couldn't sleep because of the parasite cleanse we were doing. And you could, a pretty horrific scene, looking down the toilet and seeing Jurassic Park. But, but these things need to be gotten rid of, sadly. And yeah. So, but yeah, the full moon makes a big difference.
It does. And my last 10 years, I spent working psych crisis in the large hospital ERs. And boy, during the full moon, we knew we were going to be in for it. You know, we just.
I work in kitchens, which could also be considered a slight mental institution. The amount of times in fact, this happened last Saturday, I think, and everyone was in a weird, foul, really weird. Even really positive guys were in a weird mood.
Have they all been double tapped, Chris?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Just about everyone else. But I came home and I said, weird. Everyone's in a really weird mood today. Even really positive people were. And I said this to you before, and we always said, is it a full moon or do you have a full moon? It was like a day before a full moon, and I literally said it 100 times. It's definitely a full moon, or there's one coming, and you look up and it's there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There's something to that for sure. This one, the number 6, the voices get louder when ignored. I remember checking that out once. When I'm working at the state hospital, I was sitting through a session with a psychiatrist and their patient, and the patient asked, well, I'm hearing these voices. What do I do? And he said, just ignore them. And I'm like, it's that easy? So I called that guy back in 2 weeks later, just to talk to him. I said, hey, I remember the psychiatrist telling you to ignore your voices. And I said, how'd that work? He goes, it didn't. And then I called one in after another. I'd ask him, what happens when you ignore the voices? Every single one of them said they get louder. They will not be ignored. You can't ignore them. You can't push them. You can't force them out. They get louder and more persistent if you try to ignore them.
One thing they don't like is acknowledgement.
I would guess as well from the psychiatrist saying that to them, they just say, "Oh yeah, they've gone now. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, you great job, thank you." Just so they don't get more medication, more grief. They probably just tell them, "Yeah, what you told me worked," kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the other thing I saw too. They don't tell. I mean, like Jenny said, it didn't get rid of the voices. But if Jenny went in there and said, "I'm still hearing them," they go, "Oh, well, we'll put you on more of it, or we'll put you on a stronger one." Until you're just like, you're still hearing voices? I ain't telling you. And that happened consistently. They wouldn't tell the psychiatrist because they knew what would happen. They drug them senseless, with those drugs. Mm-hmm. So that's another pattern. The voices get louder when ignored. I mean,
I'm just trying to go on.
Sorry, Jenny. Go on. No, it's all right.
I was just wondering whether, sorry, I was wondering if the voices get louder when they're ignored. Is this what's happening in the MSM? I mean, how?
Oh, yeah. Look at it. You can see it.
Yeah. You see a very good analogy.
Yeah. You hit it on the head there, Jim.
Yeah.
You ignore them and they scream louder.
Yeah. And even in the world now, things are getting crazier and crazier because no one's listening. People
when you think about the MSM, really, it's aimed at however many people there are. There's 4 of us here. Think like we do. 5% of the world population, or wherever it might be. It's all aimed at us. Everything's about attacking people who disagree with them.
Yeah,
especially at the minute, it is.
And dividing people and fostering fear. That's one of the big things the voices do is they foster paranoia. And look at the messages we're getting. Oh, you're all going to die of COVID, and 50 million people drop dead in the streets, and it's all lies. They don't care as long as they are upsetting people and dividing people. So the voices don't want people to be together. They want to break up marriages. They break up families. They want the person isolated. So there's no interference from anybody except them. And that's exactly what the mainstream media is doing right now. Stay away from your friends. You can't go out. You can't go to church. You can't go anywhere. You can stay 6 feet away and don't touch one another. And I mean, it's divisive, just like the voices are. It's the exact same thing on a macroscopic scale. So
when have these things steadily cranked up? Do we think over a period? I don't know. Let's just say the last 100 years.
What's that? The voices?
The voices.
No, they've been around for thousands of years. I mean,
yeah, I accept that, but do we think that for some reason they've got more of a hold at this moment in time?
well, I think once science came on 200 years ago and started explaining and rationalizing everything, I mean, prior to that, people knew these were demons. They knew they were evil spirits. They knew it. You know, that they would. It was common knowledge. But once science took over 200 years ago, and especially when psychiatry came on, you know, oh yeah, these are hallucinations. These guys got a broken brain. Don't listen to anything they say. They're wacko. That you can't believe anything they say. They're nuts. You know. So when science came on and started rationalizing, there was no way to measure it. There was no way to prove it. Other than the schizophrenics themselves, and they weren't talking to them. You know, and the schizophrenics weren't talking to them either because they didn't trust them. You know, so here's the patient showing these marked symptoms, and they're all the same symptoms, and psychiatry doesn't want to know anything about the most predominant symptom that these guys are displaying, the voices,
because
they just blow it off.
Because the thing they're bringing to us, and that you saw firsthand, Jerry, was a portal into another world, really.
That's right.
A door into another world.
Well, that's what it is. It's a portal into a dark world, you know.
Yeah, very
which
dark world.
These people can be walked out of if there's a certain point beyond which they won't return. I've seen that over and over and over again. You know, they're so far gone, they're never coming back. But there's a lot of people that they can be walked back. They can be brought back if you know what you're doing. And that happened in the prison. I ended up in front of the medical director in an inquisition when the patient started fully recovering, going off their meds and no more psychotic symptoms. It can be done. They don't want you to know that.
As George proved.
George, yeah, I talked to George the other day. He's doing real well. You know, he's got the voices beat back. Matter of fact, he's taunting them now. You know, instead of just leaving them alone, he's actually taunting them. He was telling me the other day, he said, entertain me. He's telling the voices, entertain me. And they're going, we're not entertained. We're not doing anything with you. You don't listen to us. And he's going, entertain me. Go ahead and entertain me. So he's taunting them. Yeah. So I said, you need to just get rid of them totally. So he said they're down to 0.02% of where they were when I first started working with.
Fantastic. Yeah. What a great guy. And the thing is, these points that you've got here, you could actually swap over and put them in Britain. There's a group in Sage called Spy B. You could actually swap them over onto their plan of how to terrify a nation, and it'd probably fit whatever.
Yeah,
and I've actually read that document, and I know there'd be an equivalent in America where they've just been terrifying people. But foster isolation. I mean. That one phrase there sums up what we've all had to do over the last 18 months.
Yeah, it's the same thing. That's what I'm telling you. You know, psychiatry's got their head so far up their butts when they say that these things are hallucinations that they're probably not going to get it out in my lifetime. You know, they're so programmed and so arrogant. And they have the medical degree. And it's like, yeah, we know something. They don't know jack squat about schizophrenia. They know nothing about it. You know, and when they start asking the patients about what they're experiencing and what is happening, then they're going to start learning. But right now, they don't know jack squat. You know,
but when you think, sorry, Jenny, go on.
Go ahead.
Psychiatrists have the highest rate of suicide amongst all medical staff.
They do. And you know what?
Yes,
it's equivalent to that of the schizophrenics themselves, which is really interesting. So the suicide rate for schizophrenics is 3 to 5 times that of the general population. And so is the suicide rate of psychiatrists. It's just slightly lower than that, but it's in the same ballpark.
What does that even mean? Is that a karmic thing? Or what does that even mean?
Why they're like it, you mean?
No, I mean just why, like Jerry said, it balances out at literally the same percentage. Is that a karmic thing, do you think?
I reckon they're as infected as their patients. I think they're as infected with self-doubt and misery as their patients.
Yeah, and they see their patients aren't getting any better. They get worse. You know, with time.
Maybe they know what they're doing is wrong as well. And because how on a conscious level maybe not, and maybe they're doing it for the money and the esteem of being a doctor and all this type of thing. But underneath somewhere, just like the people that are running around at the minute, lifting the sleeve up to be speared in their arm, one of the most divisive things is the jab. If you jab your kids, it's the biggest thought that people have in medicine. People put thought into. They don't put the right thought into it, but they're still scared of it. There's something about it. If the doctor writes a prescription for some antibiotics or antidepressants, they'll take them. Whereas jabs, people actually do fear them.
Oh yeah,
there's a fear there.
Yeah.
Not just people like us,
And then there's going to be more fear. Yeah, more fear generated when these people start getting sick and they see that it doesn't stop the virus anyway.
It's interesting. It's called a jab or a shot. Two quite negative inflictions on your own body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got reports of 2 17-year-olds dying very suddenly in their sleep straight after vaccination.
Yeah. And the mainstream media won't report any of that. They say
not one school.
Yeah.
No, they're not good. They're never going to report.
No, worldwide,
they cover up.
They cover it up. Yeah,
they cover it up.
The worldwide, I heard it was as high as 147,000 people have died from those injections so far, higher by far than any other vaccine that they've ever put out, and they're still pushing it.
Yeah.
And then
and people do. We're seeing people now come through our clinic, and they over the last for 6 months we didn't hear anything, and the last 3 to 4 weeks we've had 5 or 6 people contact us. Mainly ladies, young ladies as well in the 20s, who have got the central nervous system damage with constant non-epileptic seizures, just shaking, falling over and just shaking. And do you know what the doctors are saying? It's all in your head.
Yeah,
you're depressed. Yeah. This is what they're being told by the fraternity that's meant to be saving the lives. And that is a similar process to if you go to a doctor and he's just jib-jabbed you and you fall over 24 hours later, anybody with any brain has to link the two together. Has to. And going back, this comes back to what you guys were on about how the mainstream, and I'll class the medical fraternity in the mainstream, not just the mainstream media, must be possessed not to see that so clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't understand how nobody can see that link. And they're prepared to cover it up rather than stand up and say there's something wrong.
Yeah, they cover it. Yeah. You'll see it on YouTube. You'll see people coming on and my daughter died or my husband died, but you won't see it covered on any of the mainstream anything. They're still pushing it. Matter of fact, this morning, here's a fake thing. They showed the studio where Biden is sitting there getting his third jab, and somebody took a picture of the set. They made it look like it was in this White House. They have a fake White House in Georgia that's two-thirds the size of the original. So Biden is doing all making it look like he's in that White House. It's all fake, and it's a
studio.
I think you sent me that. I didn't.
I sent it you. Yeah.
So he uses that to make it look, but he's been turned out of the White House. I mean, the National Guard, when they tried to get in, they locked it right in front of him and Kamala Harris. Said, "You're not getting in." So all this stuff all this stuff that's being filmed, like Biden is in the White House, is in that 2/3 model that it was built by some billionaire in Georgia. And they're doing all their filming down there. So when you look at Monkey Works and where Biden's plane is flying, he's constantly flying over to Georgia where they're doing these film sets where it looks like he's in the White House. It's all fake.
His inauguration inauguration, if I got it right, that looked fake to me as well.
Yeah, you could see where it breaks up. It broke up.
Yeah.
And then they had one lady who was doing one of the tribunals. So the tribunals are happening, and they were flying her back and forth to the White House where those tribunals were happening. And they kept doing that. And she goes, I can't keep doing this. I got a family, I got kids, I got a job. I want to get this done all at once. So they did that. And then they called Biden in, the one you see on television all the time. And when they got to him, she'd been trafficked to all these people. When they got to him, she said, "That's not Biden. That's not the guy who raped me. I don't know who he is, but that's not Biden." And she goes, that's some imposter. That's I don't know who he is. And that kind of threw the tribunal off for a day or two.
Right.
But here she was. She
Wow.
she was, and she came out and she was talking all about the tribunal and what happened in there, and she was one of the trafficked people.
I suppose that's number 9 there, Jerry. Demand the attention of victims.
Yeah. Well, we got self-destructive. Yeah, that's number 9. But 7, foster self-destructive behavior. Virtually, these voices are constantly sabotaging the person from succeeding at anything. And I've watched that when I was working at the Arbor Psych Rehab Center. As they approached graduation in one of their vocational classes, they'd stop taking their meds, or they'd do something that screwed it up where they didn't graduate. So the voices are constantly telling them to do stuff where they won't succeed. Where they'll get in trouble.
It makes you wonder whether the voices, I'll use it, the voices, the parasites, whatever you want to call them, they've come up with this competitive environment that the whole human race seems to want to live in.
Right. Instead of working in harmony, they're...
Yeah. Instead of... I was talking on the phone with someone today, and we were saying, if we wanted to feed the world, for want of a better phrase, you could get rid of bags of snacks and things like that, stop the energy being used to make that nonsense and poison people, and concentrate on organic farming. Use that workforce in that, and that'd feed the world. You wouldn't need all this mass-produced rubbish to start with.
Dom, everything could be solved instantly.
Of course it could.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the system is set up now for the voices or the parasites, wherever you want to call them, to absolutely totally thrive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why they're thriving.
Yep.
Like a nest of snakes type of
Exactly.
thing.
Whatever it is, wherever they're coming from, it's their time now, isn't it? And I don't know, and they're reaching their crescendo, if you like.
Yeah,
they've been doing this for forever, but now they're being exposed. I mean, people didn't know about it before, but now they're being exposed like that never before. So number 8 is foster isolation. They don't want the schizophrenic to have any friends. They don't want them to. They break up families. They break up marriages. They'll tell the schizophrenic, your husband or your wife or your girlfriend is cheating on you. Don't trust her. She's running around with another man. They'll tell the schizophrenic, go in your bedroom and lock your door and stay away from your parents. They're just no good. I mean, so just like their goal is to destroy any kind of positive relationship you have and foster negative ones. So they'll tell these people to hang around with drug addicts and users and all these and gangsters and stuff like that. So they foster that isolation by inserting negative thoughts and destructive thoughts and mistrust and
well, that's what's happening in the mainstream, isn't it? That's
exactly
what they're doing entirely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I happened to be doing some outreach work the other Saturday in our local town in Essex, and I was handing out leaflets with common law information on them, saying, look, if you lock down again, or if you want to keep your business open, please contact us. And I was handing out these leaflets.
Great.
And this woman at this stall that she was on, I handed her a leaflet and she said, are you vaccinated? And I said, no. She said, well, go away. I don't want you here. And I thought, oh my goodness.
Wow.
I had a similar one. I was in the drugstore the other day and they had the 6-foot markings, to isolate people 6 feet away. And I was 2 feet past that mark, and here's this older lady, at the counter paying. And all of a sudden, she turns around, she starts screaming at me. Can't you see that mark there? You were 2 feet past that mark. Why do you have it? You gotta get back there where you belong and follow the rules. And I'm like, just screaming and hollering, and it's like, so I moved back to the mark, and she's, you're still got your toes over the mark, and I'm like, oh my God, and I just sat there. I kept telling, I felt like telling her, you're gonna die eventually.
Yeah.
Well, I've said that before. I've said that before. It's all built on fear.
Yeah.
And we'll all die anyway one day. So what are you trying to get? An extra 20? What are you trying to achieve?
There's two things to that.
Well,
Chris,
they're generating that fear, that negative emotional energy, and that's what they're feeding on. That's what they're.
But imagine, right? Someone somewhere knows what happens I'm sure someone somewhere on here after people die, someone knows, right? If we were told that information, all fear would go, and they would not have this hold on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the past, Dom, that's what real spiritualism or the core of religion did.
Yeah.
You know, it
Well,
made
Buddhism
people
was
think,
one of those. Yeah.
all of them. I mean,
Yeah.
it made you think that there's more to this, and this is a test, and I need to do the right thing by my fellow man. That's what they literally all say, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's been corrupted somewhere down the line,
totally corrupted.
massively.
It's been hijacked,
yeah,
hasn't it?
obviously.
It's been
Yeah,
hijacked.
I know I'm saying the bleeding obvious there, but
the message from wherever has been totally hijacked. Whereas
Yeah.
now you're scorned if you say things like that, aren't you?
Just like Jenny said there, have you been jabbed? Everyone's running around terrified. In fact, it should be the other way around. You should have been running around terrified because she had been.
I do think though that, and I was talking to a guy at work about this who has been double tapped, and I don't think that their plan to divide us is quite. I mean, I know except for them stories, is quite working how they want it to work. I think that people genuinely are going, well, I don't care what you've done. You know, get on with your life, whatever. Except for these certain crackpots, but you'll get them from both sides. You'll get them from the double jabbed and the not. But I don't think it's quite working. I don't think we're turning on each other quite as nastily as they want us to be honest. I don't think we will, because I think humanity will beat this.
Yeah, they have these football games over here now where the stadiums are full of young people and they're screaming, you know, F Biden, the whole stadium,
right?
You know, screaming F Biden, and no masks. None of them have masks on.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. You know, there's a certain desperation, if you ask me, about all of this. There always has been.
Like I said, Dom, if there's certain points we can win little battles in this war, if you like, we'd never know, would we? Because they're not going to tell you on the TV.
No, you have to dig for it.
We wouldn't be informed, would we? Yeah, you got to dig for it. Exactly.
I mean, the one thing they don't like is the stuff we're discussing tonight, where you're lifting a rock and shining a light on these things. Yeah, parasites. They don't like that.
No.
So where are we next then,
Number
Jerry?
9 is they demand the attention of their victims. They will not leave them alone. It's constant. You know, it's badgering them. They can't get away from them. If they try to ignore them or distract themselves, they'll try to pull the person back to what they're telling them. Jenny, you probably experienced that while you were in there. You know, you had no inner peace. They were just constantly on you, you know, all the time.
Yeah.
Your brain was going, yeah.
Yeah, a bit like Dom said, that my head was busy constantly, and
it wasn't good stuff.
I couldn't eat. It wasn't good stuff. No, it wasn't sort of like, oh, I'm going to do this, and how exciting, and I want to do that.
It was all negative stuff.
It was being on the run, trying to sidestep this, sidestep that.
Paranoia.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I think a lot of people could relate to that, though. You see a lot of that. I mean, the nonsense we've just witnessed in this country with the fuel is one of those. They said there was going to be a fuel shortage, which there isn't. In me and Chris were talking about this. My view is there's an excess amount of fuel, so they thought nobody went and drove anywhere last year, and we've got all this fuel left. How do we sell it all, and how do we increase the price without anybody knowing? We tell them there's a fuel shortage, so we can increase the price, and everyone goes nuts and goes and buys more fuel than they actually need.
Well, all your drivers left. You're missing like a.
Well, I don't think that's true, Jerry. I think some of the drivers might have left, but that's the story they're using to generate this fear. And
also, I went to a petrol station the other day, and so there's a queue round the block, and I joined it by accident. Anyway, I needed some, so I was in there 20 minutes. But out of about 12, 15, 16 pumps or whatever it is, 2 were working. So the queue was manufactured just to cause stress, more drama. And more. There was 2. I've got a diesel car. There was 2 diesel out of about 12, I think, or 8, something like that. They were the only ones turned on, and surely all the fuel comes from the same place, so that shouldn't be a factor in the situation, should it?
And also, they were only selling premium. Which
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, exactly. And you didn't know what you were getting, really. It might have not been premium. It might have been scrapings of the barrel as well, bottom of the barrel type stuff. But
so you queue for 2 hours and you've got to buy premium.
A total manufactured nonsense.
And you look at the fear
like
that generates. I can't get to work. I can't feed my kids. I can't go to the grocery store. I can't get to the. Look at the massive amount of fear that generates when you need a car to commute to your work and to get on with everyday life, and then you're worried about how am I going to do this? How am I going to get to work? How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to pick up my kids?
Well, you probably didn't see it over there, Jerry, but they actually announced on the TV. They said there's a shortage of drivers, but don't panic. Don't panic by fuel. Everyone shot. It's like the toilet roll fiasco.
Yeah.
Everyone shot there and filling jerry cans up and
There've been fights in the forecourts, hasn't there?
As
well. Again, more fear, more violence.
Yeah,
more
violence, and look at the divisiveness,
more argument.
The divisiveness.
I mean, somebody somewhere is laughing, aren't they? They're laughing at people fighting over getting a gallon of fuel. Yeah.
Well, these psychos, they've got a cruel sense of humour. I mean, even like Joe was saying about your president, that's a joke, isn't it? It's a joke, and we're being mocked for even thinking that it's real.
Yeah. Like the old NASA nonsense. Everything's just, the deeper down, whether it's deeper down or the more opened up, everything just becomes more obvious as an illusion.
Yeah.
It's what isn't an illusion now. Because as soon as I see something, I think I saw a policeman in America. He'd handed his notice in because he didn't want to be double tapped. Right, brave guy, fantastic. But then I thought, well, why is he on Fox News? Yeah, so he's on Fox News, right? Because they want people to hand their notice in instead of hanging tight and then suing the police. Whatever federation for wrongful dismissal.
Yeah, these people,
and that's the advert that they're putting out there.
They have to make them fire them. They want people to walk off the job. No, make them fire you. If you won't take that, make them fire you and give you a documentation that you were fired because you didn't take this experimental noxious drug that people are dying from. Make them fire you,
and then you can sue them.
Then you can sue them later.
They've done the same over here with nurses, haven't they? They've done the same over here.
Yeah.
I got a note from somebody that she was staying home. They weren't fired. She didn't resign, and they didn't fire her. Another nurse showed up at work and said, "You didn't fire me. I didn't quit. I showed up for work. You want to fire me, and put it in writing." And they didn't do it. They wouldn't do it.
More fear-based results.
And now they got hospitals in New York are saying, "Well, we'll recruit foreign nurses. We'll get nurses from Mexico and South America, and National Guard. We'll put them in there to man the hospitals." They're friggin' lunatic. I mean, that new mayor of the new governor of New York after they kicked out Cuomo, he should be put in prison for murder. And
I would hazard a guess that you could get all the mayors, all the politicians, and you could probably put them all in prison for that very thing. And misuse of power, whatever you want to call it. And in more or less every country at this moment in time, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany.
Right.
They're all as culpable as the rest of them. There's 600 and odd MPs in this country, and I would say not one of them has stood up and actually spoke the truth about what's going on. Some of them have pretended to stand up. A couple of sirs, I think, stood up a little bit and said something that were out of order, arresting an old woman and all this type of... But they've not really said anything, have they? They've not really gone into detail about what's gone on. It's probably the same in your country as well, Jerry. But all these... like the talking heads on... You've got the guy on CNN, what's he called? The Vanderbilt geezer, the albino.
I never watch CNN. It's just pure propaganda.
Well, I don't watch any news, but... Over here, we've got like Chris listens to LBC and things like that.
I don't listen to it.
Don't listen to any of the American mainstream media. It's all propaganda, all of it.
All of it is. But what I'm trying to get at is these people who are on there. You can see that most of these things, if you ever do see any of it, is staged. Even when they get caught, people who are calling in. Christian used to say to me, they'll call in the morning about a certain subject. Then in the afternoon, the MPs will be talking about it in Parliament.
They've solved it.
It solved the problem, and it's just
my missus thought I was psychic because I could literally predict where things were going by listening to the news in the morning. She can, the outcome's going to become in the next couple of days.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like we're not gonna. You're not gonna have a passport. You know that you're gonna have to have a passport. Yeah, and it's silly little things like that these people know. Like that Nadeem Zahawi. I mean, you probably haven't seen the podcast me and Chris did of him about for 2.5 hours. Well, we found out that his granddad was the governor of the Central Bank of Iraq.
Oh,
exactly. Yes. So his granddad, the story is given, and anyway, so all these people.
He basically sent his country down the river, didn't he? Same as Van Tam sent Vietnam down the river.
Yeah.
Sold out all his countrymen.
They don't care. They're not like us.
They don't care. Here, they just exposed the Arizona audit in so many ways. I mean, it was a forensic audit. They cheated in a million different ways. They listed all the votes. I mean, it was like the two-thirds of the votes were cheating, illegal votes. They brought that out. They went through it step by step by step. They proved the election was stolen, and the governor has certified a false election, and he will not decertify it. He's a Democratic paid-off scumbag, and he will not decertify it. And the Secretary of State is the same way.
I like it. Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree anymore. So, one question I got asked is, where are these entities?
Well, they're around you right now. Question. They're around you. They're around us all the time.
Yeah. But where are they living in this realm? Are they living on a different realm and communicating in?
Well, they have their own realm, but they bleed into this one. So that there's a dark world in which somehow they have this what do you call it? Command structure. Where the lower ones who are invading the schizophrenics are controlled by higher ones. I remember one time where I was working with a patient and we got rid of all the lower ones. He was clean. All the voices were gone. And then all of a sudden this other one comes booming in. And, the whole time I was working with him, he said, well, I hear 3 voices. And for months, 3 voices. Okay, we got rid of one after the other, and we got rid of the last one. I'm going, okay, he's fine. And I tell him, you got to keep on a positive spiritual path and keep doing these exercises to keep them away and deal with some of the junk you got built up in there. And all of a sudden, this loud one comes booming in there, and the guy says, there's another one there. And I said, where'd that come from? He said, that's their supervisor. And that one was pissed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What happened?
It reminds me of a book I've read just 6 months ago called The Screw Tape.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Papers.
Yep. It's right on.
Did you see that one, Jerry?
Yep, I read it. And the other one is by, it's called Outwitting the Devil by, who's it, Norman Vincent Peale? It's another one like the Screw Tape letters, where it shows you how sly some of these are. It's, the voices in George's head, they were some of the slyest I've ever encountered, and they would have had him 3 times had they not been exposed. And George, look what they're doing now. He wouldn't have caught it. So they're slick. Some of them are really stupid. There's one that just went, hey, and the patient was wondering whether they believe, was it hey like a hay bale, or was it like hey, hey you? He didn't know. I mean, some of them are really dumb. You can see what they're up to right away, but some of them are very sly and cunning. They run that gamut.
I saw a little tiny TikTok video the other day with this young woman who was showing a document from the CIA saying that 0.035% of our ability to perceive reality is the human range. And I know David Icke talks about this, that we have a very, very narrow ability to decode reality. And I think the CIA paperwork said that there's 0.035% that we can decode from our environment, which means there's over 99% of stuff going on around us we don't see, we don't hear, we can't perceive, because we're just not tuned into it.
Right.
And I thought
they don't want us to tune into it.
Exactly.
because we must have an ability to tune into it. There must be
they're
something
hitting you all the
we
time.
could be trained to
Yeah,
do.
well, they hit you all
I
the
often
time. They're hitting you all the
often
time.
think that is that why the nonsense is going on now? Do they know that we're evolution, like we're stepping up?
Yep.
Or the veil's dropping.
Yep.
So they're bombarding us with all this crap
Right.
now. So we don't notice we're unaware of his own ability that could just come into fruition.
Yeah, they know their time is limited.
Yeah, and we've got them to thank actually for this incredible awakening, this incredible raising of the vibrational frequency. And I mean, you guys will appreciate, even with you three here today, that we found a purpose. We found a purpose in all of this nonsense,
Don't sound quite as crazy as it used to.
No.
Or feel quite as crazy as it used to.
No. And there's a real purpose. There's a real sort of camaraderie. There's a real happiness to meet people that think similar thoughts to you.
Yeah.
And, also I find in our community is that there's a very a great, massive tolerance for all of those people that can't see. I mean, we're not gloating. We're not, sucking our teeth in. And do you know what I mean? We're actually very sad and hopeful that more people will join us,
Yeah, someone said to me, why are you treating people that have been double tapped in your clinic? And I says, because they're us now. They've jumped over the fence. They know that they've been screwed over. They know now. They don't quite know like we didn't. When you first realise something, you can't know everything. But they know deep down now that the system is not what they've been told or led to believe. Because they're basically being called liars, and it's not their fault that they're being called liars. And also, the system spends billions of pounds and billions of hours trying to mind control everybody.
Yeah.
So we can't be too surprised that most of the people are mind controlled.
Right.
All of us have been at some point, whether we want to accept it or not.
And also the biggest hurdle is, Dom, is on a larger scale of microcosm what Jerry talks about in the institutions, is the first realization is that these people haven't got your interest at heart at all.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And that's the hardest pill to swallow for most people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Excuse me, guys.
It's all right. Because we've been told that they always have our best interests at heart.
Look at what the psychiatrists were doing during World War II with the Nazis. They were picking out who to execute. This guy's mentally defective. Offing. That was.
I mean, if you were going to set up a torture plan, what they're doing now would be the typical good cop, bad cop torture plan, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We're going to lock you down, but we're also going to look after you.
Total confusion.
Total confusion. And again, everything you're listing here, Jerry and Jenny, and talking about is the mainstream, not just media, but mainstream government, whatever you want to call it, that's happening now to everybody. The system is set up to destroy you.
Yeah, and keep in mind, these patterns come from the psychotic voices that schizophrenics hear. And you can see the one-to-one correspondence between psychosis. I mean, this is psychosis being manifested, right? These patterns. And look at the leaders. They're as crazy as any schizophrenic, what they're doing to us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same patterns on a macroscopic level.
Yeah. Boris Johnson's a pathological liar.
Yes.
He can't say anything true.
Well,
he can't even answer how many children he's got.
Do you remember last Christmas when they were on about whether we could have Christmas? It was their decision. And a week before Christmas, he said, if we were to stop Christmas, it would make us inhuman. And then they stopped Christmas. I remember hearing it and thinking, what does that even mean? Is he admitting that they're not even human? What is he saying there? He actually said it the week
I don't
before.
like Christmas, but
yeah, well, me neither. But whatever. But yeah.
Okay. Well, number 10,
stressing out the whole nation.
Yeah.
Number 10,
Jerry.
They maneuver for increased control over their victims. So I remember some of the patients. One guy said when he first started hearing voices, I said, well, what did they tell you when you first started? And he said, well, they told me to do weird stuff like go pick up a pencil or sit down or walk a certain way. So it's almost like somebody getting into a new car and seeing how it worked.
How obedient he is.
Yeah, it was weird, but that's one thing they do. They will take more and more and more control, until they get to a point where that person isn't coming back.
Can you see this, Jenny, in like when you hear these like Susan Mickey and people like that talking? Can you see that sort of behaviour in them when?
What, that they're...
Well, last week we were having a discussion because we were meant to record last week. We had some technical issues, but if you remember, you were saying you can, when you're listening to these people talk, you can sort of see that they're lying, if you like.
Oh, yeah. What I do is I listen. I watch the video without the sound on.
That's right.
That's right. That's what you said.
Yeah, and the minute I can see the face, it doesn't matter what the words are. I can see their whole countenance, who they are, what they're hiding, what they don't want to reveal. It's all in their body language. I'm not a body language expert, but I can see through people very quickly. I think I told you guys last week when we were doing our pre-run that I used to take patients from the waiting room at the doctor's surgery to my office at the end of the waiting room, and by the time they'd come into my office and sat down, I knew what was wrong with them. And it literally took 10 seconds to walk down the corridor. But what's happening is I can sense and feel on a completely different energetic level to anything they're going to tell me. So I would never say to them, oh, by the way, I think you've got this problem. That's not very ethical or professional. But, by the time they'd sat down, within seconds, maybe 5 minutes, they were telling me what I already knew. Yeah. And that was fascinating. So I think over 20 years of doing this, and Jerry, you might be able to confirm this, that you get to just know, you just to get to feel the energy coming out of somebody. And I think, was it you guys we talked about this with last week, but with Boris Johnson, I can see he's just a henchman. He's got no conscience whatsoever. No. Don't think he likes what he's doing. But
I've said that as well, actually. Yeah,
he's going to do it anyway. Yeah, he doesn't care. Do it anyway. Yeah.
Me and Dom, when we did his thingy on Boris Johnson, I think what we kind of agreed on was he looked like he'd been put in that place. He was a bit of a playboy and a bit of a trier as he went through his life. He was given he was helped all the way to the point where he became prime minister.
He was a spoiled prince, didn't he?
He behaved like a spoiled prince because his dad's got more clout than he has. He behaved like a spoiled prince. Then he got given that prime minister thing. Thought, this is brilliant. I've got this, and we as a suspicion that he didn't realise that this was going to happen. So all his, bravado of getting there was kind of ruined with this. That's why he looks so distasteful of what's going on. Yeah, he thought he was in for party time. But
he reminded me of George Bush on 9/11 when he was in that school.
Oh yeah. He just sat there with that blank look on his face. He didn't even. He knew it was happening. He knew it.
Yeah.
Well, we were on about this, Jerry, and it was Webster Tarpley I saw talk about George Bush. And when he sat there, he said it looked like he was scared, like he didn't know if he was going to get it next.
Yeah.
That's the feeling I got.
He didn't react. Yeah. I mean, he reacted. He just kind of nodded his head and went on talking to the kids, like he was aware that it had happened.
Terrified and didn't, and also like, my God, they've actually done that. That's what they've done. When I get in Air Force One, am I going down?
They threatened Obama on that one.
Yeah. But going back to what you were saying, Jenny, about Johnson, you're right. He doesn't like, but these people have been subjected to. When we did our Blair presentation, we found that in 2 of his schools, there were 2 paedophiles in each school, and one of them in his, we class it as a junior school or his first school here, was his comforted him while his dad, because his dad had a stroke, privately on numerous occasions. This is documented, this, and he was a known paedophile. And then in his secondary school at Fetters in Edinburgh, another known paedophile was his mentor. Wow. And his nickname was Miranda. Yeah, and you've got to ask. Do you know when we did that, Chris? I wanted to go for a shower. You felt like you'd been part of something you shouldn't have been, just from doing the research. Like you'd been part of something awful that happened to that boy. you know, and it were quite unnerving, really. That was the most. If anything, if anybody sums up the satanic ritual, willing to carry out that evil work, I think Tony B. Liar is that person who sums up that increased control over victims type of character. Is Tony B. Liar.
He's directly responsible for over 1 million people in Iraq, and he didn't even apologise.
No.
Iraq and Afghanistan. He didn't
No, he
apologise.
says we should have been there longer.
Yeah. Well, they dragged him out over Afghanistan now, didn't they? Saying, why we're leaving.
Yeah. But yeah, these people are, when you can see the mirror, can't you, in these, what you're talking about here, in these people that have been in our lives, poisoning our minds, casting spells in for our generation and future generations to come.
They're infested. They're infested. And back to what Jenny was saying, she had that sixth sense. I had developed, and I don't know when it started, a similar sixth sense. So when I was working in the ER, you only had, they didn't want you treating anything. They just wanted you put him in, let him go, or send him to a mental health center. And they wanted him out of the ER as quick as possible because the doctors didn't know how to deal with these people. They just call in psych and say, get him out of here one way or the other, get him out of here. But I developed a sense where I could feel the voices and I could feel how strong they were. And, I'd ask the patient, I said, are you hearing voices? They'd say no, but I could feel them and I could feel how strong they were. And, I'd say, I'd tell them, no, you're hearing them and this is how strong they are. And they'd be shocked. Like, how'd you know that? Do you hear them too? And there were times with some of the ones who were coming in from the community full of drugs, full of heroin, full of meth. They were raw. They were more dangerous than the prisoners. The only place more dangerous is in the jail where they're withdrawing. So they were some pretty volatile people coming into the ER. And, I could feel that it was like this cold, icky electrical feeling when they kicked up. So I could feel how strong they were, how intense they were, and when they were active.
It's strange you say electrical, because I notice people, and I'll use Lyme disease, whether it's what we're told it is, I don't believe it is anymore, but anyway, you do become electrosensitive, chemically sensitive, things like that. And you pick up, like, if I used to go into a room that had all the Wi-Fi turned on and things, I couldn't stand the static or the EMFs in there. As soon as I left, it went quieter. But not as in noise in my head, more from a physical point of view. It was a strange sensation. And so a lot of these people probably are electrosensitive, going back to what you were saying, and giving off these frequencies.
Well, remember you were saying, are they inside or are they outside? I was feeling that reaction on my skin as if they were hitting me from the outside.
Right.
It was, and I remember one time where they got me from the inside. I was talking to this one guy who was really disturbed, and all of a sudden my mind it was like somebody opened up my head and poured in a bottle of hard liquor. I just couldn't think. I couldn't process information. I was just sitting there like trying to string a sentence together. It was the weirdest sensation I'd ever had. It's like, hey, I can't think. It's like my thoughts were being blocked. Yeah. So they can hit you both on the inside and the outside.
Imagine if these people watching on TV have got that power to an extent, and they're just blasting it out to the whole the whole world.
Well, I'm sure they are, and dropping it out of planes as well. The light in the sky up everywhere now. It's that bad. Even my youngest is spotting it and saying, "What's that up in the sky? They're making like patterns, Dad." He's 10-year-old and he's noticing it. It's quite obvious, isn't it? That's dropping on us, and I think it's Alana Freeland that's talking about that being part of the MK Ultra process.
Yeah, that's how they were spraying the skies over here this morning. Spraying that crap in the skies and making.
And yet they still deny it. They're still actually saying we're not doing that when it's blatantly obvious.
I thought they admit it on a level, don't they? Don't they admit
they
it
do. They sort of admit it, but they don't admit they're doing it on the scale that it's actually happening.
Yeah.
Oh, it used to be worse. I remember I was like, maybe 800 miles down into Mexico in this little colonial town, And they were just, these weren't Mexican planes. They don't have planes that do that. These were deep state planes, and they had covered the sky with this, whatever they were spraying, so deeply that the sun faded out. And the people weren't paying any attention. I'm like, hey, wait, they're just walking around like nothing's happened. I'm like, what?
Let's get on to point 11. We're an hour 44 in, Jerry.
Okay.
And
gaslighting.
Might have to be a part 2.
Let me give you an example of this. There was one schizophrenic I was talking to who the voices had convinced him that he had murdered somebody, but he wasn't sure whether he'd done it because, his head was so messed up. So he couldn't turn himself into the police because if he hadn't done it, he'd look like a lunatic and they'd take him and lock him up somewhere. On the other hand, if he had done it, they were looking for him and he was paranoid. So they had him in a catch-22. So here they were gaslighting and making him believe that he had done something he hadn't done.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we're seeing that all over the media, aren't we?
Yeah.
That is everywhere at the moment.
Everywhere.
I heard some story in the States, Jerry, about, was it the Rolling Stone? It was, I tell you who it was. It was Jimmy Dore on the Jimmy Dore show. He was interviewing Robert Malone and the RNA man.
Yeah.
And he was saying there was a story that ran in the Rolling Stone, and it said people are queuing up at the hospital for treatment for overdose from ivermectin. And so Jimmy Dore phoned up the hospital, or somebody did, and said, is this true? And the hospital said, absolutely not. We've not seen anyone with an overdose of anything ivermectin related. It's a lie. By the time they'd got the information clear, it had been repeated by about 12 different media channels, all left-leaning.
Yep, that's what they're doing. Matter of fact, over here with the Arizona audit, Fox News came on and said the audit proved that Biden won. A blatant lie. Fox News broadcasting this. Yeah, unbelievable.
I remember in England, it was there was one. I think it was last Christmas, and it said last year that the wards are full of children with Divock.
Yeah.
And that was a lie. It was never mentioned again, and it just petered out. But it was just fired in there.
Yeah, it was just fired out there. Cast that spell in people's mind.
Yeah.
And then to bring it back out again round about now.
And the cracking one was last Christmas. They said, "Hug your granny this Christmas, and you'll kill her for the New Year."
Yeah, they had an advert playing.
Yeah, they were saying that.
Susan Mickey.
Hug your granny, and you'll kill her for Christmas.
Ironically, the ivermectin thing. For some reason, they don't like that being brought into.
No, because there's cures of stuff.
Regardless of what's going on,
you can't get it.
But there's another. But what does it kill? What's ivermectin?
It's antiparasitic, isn't it? It's antiparasitic.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I've heard it talked about. I didn't know what it was.
It's antiparasitic. So,
right.
Does it surprise us that they don't want to mention an antiparasite drug that might get rid of parasites?
Right.
Yeah, and they won't prescribe it over here. They
won't prescribe it anywhere.
You can't get it. The buzzards. No. Well, number 12 is manipulating perception, and that's kind of what Jenny was talking about. When she was, they were manipulating her perception of what was going on. What people were thinking, what they were doing, how they were acting, what was going on in her environment.
Going to that there, do you think that they've programmed people with alternates now? So people are behaving not as they were born, but as an alternate human, different, like somebody would with split personalities. Because
do you mean Joe Public?
Yes.
I think there's an element of that. I mean, if you take my daughter's father, he's on the spectrum anyway, but he's just unrecognizable. He's just an advocate for Big Pharma.
Yeah, a shell.
A shell. I mean, where has his humanity gone?
Yeah. I see a lot of people like that though, and just that blank gaze, like they've been inside and they haven't. Like they've been somewhere, one of these facilities that Jerry talks about, and they haven't been there. But I suppose they have, haven't they, over the last 2 years? They've been in an open air facility where they haven't been able to do anything.
Right. They don't call it programming for nothing.
Yes. Yeah. So, shall we pick a few of these out, Jerry, or we're going to miss them again, aren't we?
Yeah.
I know you want to go through them all, and I want to go through them all.
Let's move quickly then. We already covered they have complete access to the memory. 14, they demand that the victim not tell anybody about their presence. Just like the deep state. They don't want to be seen. They're in the background. They're in the dark. They don't like being exposed. And anybody who tries to expose them, they attack and beat down. Same thing with the voices. When the patient tries to tell somebody about them, don't tell him. They'll lock you up. They'll think you're weird. They'll send you to the psychiatrist. And they do. The voices are consummate liars. See, they don't care whether they generate that negative emotional energy with truth or lies. It's easier to make up a lie. And most of what they tell people are lies.
Again, what we're seeing now.
They're lies.
Everything
I was just about to
lie.
say, when you're going through this, Jerry, I'm getting confused whether they're talking about now or the schizophrenics.
They're the same. That's what I'm saying. They're the same.
Totally,
Schizophrenic
totally
voices are the same as these nutcases that are running our world right now.
It's actually. I mean, I know it was going down the road, but it's so unbelievably.
They're so
obvious. Isn't
yeah,
it?
there's a one-to-one correspondence. If the voices are real, and these are how they manifest themselves. These are the patterns that they manifest themselves. This is the operational definition of the psychotic voices. That psychiatry and all their infinite wisdom are denying ever exist. As long as they deny that, they're never going to find a cure for schizophrenia ever.
I mean, you could say that Boris Johnson or any of these people, I know they're controlled by entities, by other people behind them, but even them people are controlled by this.
Right.
This is controlling their advisors and their advisors. It's so deep. I don't mean the subject. I mean the layers that it goes back to, because Boris Johnson's convinced, trying to act out that he's doing everything right, when in reality he knows what he's doing is wrong, and then he's been advised to do it as well, and it's
a lie.
Yeah, just basically a lie.
I had a dawning realization. I thought I saw Dom. I'll say this very quickly, sorry, but I was listening to the news and they were interviewing a politician, and it just dawned on me that the interviewer, BBC, whatever, on the radio, had more. I believe she had more power than the politician she was interviewing. In their world, in their system, I think she had more clout and more authority and more power than the politician did. And it just crossed my mind. I don't know whether I'm right or not, and I'll never know. But I just thought that she knows more than he does. And
she's got the power to out him.
She's got the clout. Yeah, she's got the clout. In that conversation, she has got the clout, not him. And I don't just mean for that moment. I mean in general.
Yeah, they do not want to be.
She's got a bigger medal or a bigger badge.
They don't want to be exposed. That's the last thing. Just like the deep state, it does not want to be exposed. It wants to stay in the darkness and manipulate things from behind the curtain.
Which is what parasites want to do.
And rats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. Number 17, they can consistently steer their victim away from anything that might generate joy or happiness. And look what the mainstream media is. Oh, you can't go to baseball games. You can't go to football games. All the plays are canceled. All the shows are canceled. You can't travel. You can't. I mean, same thing. It's the same pattern.
Yeah.
The voices can manipulate feeling without speaking.
I highlighted that one. I thought that was a very interesting.
And I've felt that, working with patients, all of a sudden I'll feel this heavy, like, where did that come from? And it'd be like this depressive feeling. And it'd be like, that's not me, and then I'd take care of it and drive it out. And then I'd come back to normal again, but you could feel it. It's like this depressive thing that just kind of gets in there and just sticks there. And you go, what's causing that?
And that's like the obsessional things that people go. I know people that have basically bet their own life savings away and have continued to try and win them back, getting deeper and deeper into trouble. And now they've got no pension, if you like. People who are eating too much and they put too much weight on can't stop eating rubbish. It's the same sort of print. Who is telling these people? What's controlling them to do things? Basically self-harm over and over again.
That's them. See, and that fits in with number 19, short-circuiting reason. They get people to do things that are not reasonable. They just don't stand up to reason. And that's one of the reasons why they call schizophrenics crazy, is they do stuff that is totally irrational, that doesn't make any sense, that other people don't do. You know? They flare up in boredom. I mean, boredom is bad. The worst thing for a schizophrenic is for them to be bored, because when you were on the ward, Jenny, and didn't have anything to do, and there was no structured time.
I was constantly on the move.
Right.
I didn't stop. That's why I lost so much weight, because I was on the run. I knew if I stopped, they'd catch me.
Right.
That's how it felt for me.
Yeah. They basically made you uncomfortable in your own skin.
Oh yeah,
They do.
Which that part is, that being comfortable in your own skin is reality, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So they've knocked that reality out. Yeah.
The voices try to pass themselves off as thoughts belonging to the victim, and that's really important, because I've known several patients that I worked with who asked the voices, "Who are you? What are you?" And they would say, "We are you." If they can get the patient to believe that they are the patient, they are him, which is what we're taught from the time we're little kids. All your thoughts are yours. But if the voices can get them to believe that they are the patient, they're gone.
And the doctor's telling them
Yep.
the same thing at the same time. So they're totally alone, aren't
Selective forgetting. The voices can make them forget anything. So I'd have them write stuff down when they came to my office, because all the homework that I gave them, now they have to do the work themselves. There's nobody who can do the work for them. They have to do the work. They can break out of it. They can recover, but they have to do the work. Nobody can do it for them. So what would happen is I'd ask them, hey, write this stuff down, because by the time you leave, if you don't write it down, you're going to forget 85% of it. So they have to write it down. The voices can.
What's the biggest rising disease? What's the biggest rising mental disease? Dementia.
Yeah.
Is that another part of this whole nonsense, if you like, that's making people forget? You just said they forget things. Is that another element of it? Is what I'm trying to say. They don't get the voices, but they get the brain freeze, if you like, and lose the memory.
And a word that's bandied around now for the last year or two, brain fog. I mean, that's
brain fog.
That's just come out of nowhere,
Lyme disease, brain fog's big in, if there's a community for Lyme disease, Lyme community, brain fog is a major part of the, and Jenny will come across that, a major part of chronic fatigue and all these other illnesses is brain fog.
Absolutely.
Another one is they fill the victim's mind with negative thoughts about themselves or others. And this is one that Sherry hits on constantly. Any negative thought that comes into your mind about yourself or anybody else is them inserting that thought. And we're all being hit with that. And look what the deep state is doing to us now. These guys didn't fax. You're gonna catch it from them, and then there's the other bunch that are going, well, they got fax. They're shedding, or it's this constant negative thing about others,
And also earlier in the year, when we were all under mask mandates, that feeling of walking into a shop without a mask on and just skulking around, sort of feeling conspicuous.
The stress of going to the shop as well. Even caused me stress.
Incredibly.
Even though I had a badge, and it's still stressful.
I know. I mean, I never wore a badge, but it's very stressful, and you find that these thoughts are coming into your head. Oh my God, you're constantly in a state of
ready for an argument, ready for a fight, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes, I suppose you're preparing yourself.
Right.
Aren't you?
You're on edge anyway. You're definitely on edge.
You're paranoid. You're looking for trouble.
Me and my wife went to, that's right. Me and my wife went to Scotland with the kids a few weeks ago, and they still got a mask mandate, and they were constantly asking us if we wanted a mask, and we were the only ones there without one in that hotel, But anyway,
well, 24 destruction of a positive self-concept. The voices will destroy any positive thing you think about yourself. They'll alter it. Attempt to pull their victim away from consensual reality. So we all have a reality we agree upon, but boy, they will tug you away from that consensual reality. You might have something to say about that, Jenny, huh?
What, from my personal experience?
Yeah, the reality that they were filling your head with didn't match up with the regular reality
at
all.
Not for one moment, no. But you're stuck as a schizophrenic. You're trapped. You're trapped in that. It's not a case of they're trying to keep pulling me away. I was absolutely lost in it, in an alternative reality.
Well, as you start recovering, what they do is they start trying to pull you back. George has some stories about that, where they try to hook him and haul him back in there, and he would go, "No, I don't want that part of your reality." So it was this battle with that. You might be able to relate to 26, as they use confusion as a means of instilling negative suggestions. So they create all this confusion, which is not pleasant, and then they hit you with a suggestion. Go do this, and you go, okay, I'll do that, and all that confusion disappears, and they have a course. The same thing that's used in hypnosis, Jenny.
Yeah, I'm just looking in disbelief at how every one of these points to what we're going through now.
No, it gets weirder and more obvious, doesn't it?
It just, flabbergasted.
Yeah, you think you're talking about the mainstream media, and these are psychotic voices.
Yeah. I mean, there was a fantastic video. I do spend a lot of time watching videos, including yours as well, guys. On hypnosis, there was a guy who was an ex-stage hypnotist, and he went through all of the ways in which the deep state or the mainstream media have hypnotized the people. All of the mental confusion and all of the conflicting messages, all of the which way's up the right way, no one knows, all of the fear-mongering, and then they slip in the suggestion.
Right.
Just take the V.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the answer. Yeah, that's the answer. That's
you can go on holiday then. Yeah.
Everything will be all right once you've done that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But then they move the goalposts, don't they?
Yeah, but it's all set up like one of those, like Starsky and Hutch, for argument's sake, that they solved it after they were an hour show and they solved it. And that builds us up to that end crescendo, which is just take it. Which is going back to what was it called, that film that you with Kingsley, not Kingsley, the Lovely Beast or whatever it was called.
Sexy Beast,
where he was saying, drink the tea.
No,
that was Boris that was saying that, wasn't it?
Boris was saying drink the tea when those journalists were there, and I put it as a comparison to Ben Kingsley in Sexy Beast, where he's just berating him.
Yeah,
and constantly.
But you said he got that character from somewhere, didn't you?
I can't remember though.
Yeah, from some psychotic.
Right, I can't remember.
It was so anyway. Right. But that's what's used in film, is what we're trying to say. So we're not just talking to mainstream media; we're talking to film, obviously, as well. There to get the confusion, but then come up with the answer afterwards, and the answer is actually what they planned to do right at the beginning.
Exactly.
Got there at the end.
And the programming's thrown there, like Jerry said. Now with TV and everything, the answer is usually most films. The conclusion is someone gets shot.
Yeah, that's a way to deal with it.
And like you said, that's the answer to everything. A bit of violence will solve it.
Look what's happening. What's happening.
My youngest was watching what's them films with Vin Diesel in it? I get called Vin Diesel, but what's them films with Vin Diesel in it?
Vin Diesel.
Fast and the Furious, and that guy who were in them, Paul Walker, got killed in a car crash, and the whole film is about driving cars fast and crashing them and doing all that, and he actually got killed in a car crash,
high-speed car crash.
Yeah,
I don't think that was a coincidence. Look at how many kids watch that and how traumatized they are from it.
Well, if you were really into satanic rituals, that would be like you couldn't plan that any better.
Yeah, there was a lot. I don't know that. I don't know them films very well, but I know there was a lot of dodginess around his death as well.
Yeah. There was something wrong with the seat belts and all sorts. He sued Porsche and won, but whether it was Porsche's fault or not, I don't know. But anyway, that's another story. So
we're almost done.
I don't want to be done. But we could be here all night otherwise.
Aversion to anything positive or beautiful. They don't like beautiful things. They don't like positive things. They don't like the schizophrenic being around positive people. They don't like them going to church. They don't like they direct their attention to negative, disgusting, nasty things, and immerse them in that.
Which is
Well,
why. Sorry, go on, Jenny.
I was just going to say, if you look at some of the London marches that have happened, they are a little bit happy, clappy, airy, fairy, and everyone's loved up and it's all wonderful. But do you see that in the media? No. You see the little old lady pulled off her chair by the coppers, or do you know what I mean? You don't see
They don't go near it,
anything.
do they, Jenna? They don't go near it at all. Yeah.
I remember just a few months ago, I think there was over 1 million people in London, and the BBC reported between 350 and 600 people collected in London. There were millions.
Well, do you remember they were outside the BBC shouting "Shame on you"? Thousands of people outside the BBC, Jerry, that makes the news, shouting "Shame on you, shame on you." They didn't even report it themselves.
No.
It wasn't even mentioned. Did any
Really?
news?
No.
They were outside the window
BBC?
shouting "Shame on you, shame on you."
Yeah.
Thousands
Tens
of
of
them.
thousands.
I was there.
thousands.
Yeah.
Was you there?
I was there, yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, maybe a brick or two through their window would wake them up.
I think if the building had been alight, they wouldn't have reported it. They just didn't want to report it. It's simple as that.
Amazing.
They haven't reported
Absolutely
anything.
amazing. Yeah.
Unless anybody gets arrested. If they get arrested, then they'll report it.
They did the same thing to.
But like Jenny was saying, maybe there's too much positive energy for them even to be able to go near it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe they just warded off. Like
It's such a high vibe. I mean, you think about it. All of those people that meet in London, we should be dead 100 times over. If this virus is as contagious and as evil as it is, we should all be dead.
Or at least reported on and grassed up and said, look at these lot, they're spreading it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Not even
but it
mentioned.
didn't suit their agenda at the time.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, it's real clear they've been planning this for, 10, 20 years in advance?
And the rest.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of evidence that
Probably
Gates and the rest of them have been planning this for a long time. This plandemic.
I'd say since the Flexner report, but way back then maybe that they were getting people ready to be. Because can you imagine this? Just after the First World War at the turn of the century, there wouldn't have been riots. There'd have been people running around in this country, smashing. They were terrified of a revolution just before the First World War in this country, and so the war actually stopped a revolution in this country.
Really?
So, with Ireland kicking off over here, there were proper problems as well. And I think Winston Churchill again was involved, Mr. Satanic himself. He was involved to crush them, and then the war broke out, and everybody forgot about the Ireland problem and the problems over here with the big trade unions and things.
Well, that's the same thing that happened with 9/11. It's Cheney announced like the night before, hey, we got $1 trillion missing from the defense budget. We have no idea where it went. The next day, the World Trade Center blew up. Everybody's attention was distracted there, and not to the $1 trillion that vanished out of thin air.
Yeah,
that was gone now.
I think the records just happened to be where the plane hit the Pentagon as well.
Yeah, that's.
Do you mean the hologram?
Well, whatever hit the Pentagon. That's where they kept the records for the. I think it was $3 trillion.
Well,
anyway, whatever it was.
Thermite. I mean, you could see some of these films where you could see the thermite explosions blowing out as they went down. I mean, that was a controlled demolition if I ever saw one. That building collapsed at free fall speed.
Free fall speed.
I think
and then disintegrated as well.
Yeah, and then they shipped it off as fast as possible. They packed it up and shipped it to China before an investigation could be done.
Well, I tell you a book you want to read, Jerry, is by Judy Wood. Where did the towers go? And it might change. I agree, it was controlled, not the controlled way we think it was. But she wrote a book there that nothing else needs to be written after that. It's very rare. You see maybe about what was used, but the actual definition of where did the towers go, they just evaporated. They turned to dust. But I mean, that's another conversation. Is that? But we could go on for it. That could be about 10 shows.
Well, they actually had a film of that as it was collapsing. This big girder, just that was sticking out.
Yeah,
it just disintegrated. It just disintegrated. It just vanished right before your eyes. It's gone.
I mean, there might well have been thermite or bombs used or something like that.
There's something else.
Something else happened as well. Something else happened there. But anyway, like everything else, we get told double bluffs and treble bluffs and things like that. But you can't. You've got to trust your senses, haven't you? When you see something like that, I remember my eldest, he saw it and he went, "That's just turned to dust." And that were about 11 years ago, 12 years ago, you know. And yeah, anyway, poor kids, I've subjected them to all my research.
Good
Oh,
for
you're going to say
you.
madness then, but you then
Good
just
for
use
you.
All
research.
right, madness, yeah. Where were we, Jerry? Which number are we on now? Number 27, wasn't it?
Well, let me see. That was, we covered that one, 28.
Oh, no, we did that.
And I think we kind of covered 28 too. It's the voices are parasites. They're energetic parasites, and trying to tell a schizophrenic patient that will set them off. So you better brace yourself. And those of you out there working with schizophrenics, who psych nurses and psychologists, and forget about psychiatrists, those guys are gone. But there's other people working. Don't take our word for it on these symptoms. They're there. Open your eyes. They're right in front of your eyes. They're right there. All you got to do is open your eyes, get rid of this bull crap about them being hallucinations, and start talking to these people about these things. They'll tell you. If you talk to them, they will tell you. You know, they're not that far out where they can't tell you about that this is what the voices are doing. And you'll see they run this series of patterns over and over and over again. And if they're running patterns as extensive and persistent as these, they are not hallucinations. That's a bunch of crap. That psychiatry is blowing up your butt. And psychologists are doing the same thing. You know, their DSM, every single entry in that DSM is made up. They fabricated every single one. There is not a test anywhere that will verify any of those diagnoses in the psychiatrist manual of, I think it was 297 in the DSM-4 of psychiatric disorders. Every single one is made up.
Did you hear about the Rosenhan experiment? Did I mention it to you, Jerry, once upon a time? This American psychiatrist in 1973 decided he was going to send, let's say, a dozen stooges into hospitals with just one observation. They all had to report that they could hear the word thud. It was called the thud experiment. So they all went to hospital, reported they had this word thud, and they were all diagnosed with schizophrenia, and one was diagnosed with both bipolar or manic depression, whatever it was called at the time. And anyway, their job was to try and get out of psychiatric.
Try to get out once they put you in.
So yeah, they were trying to get out, right? So what they did was they'd sit there with their clipboard. These were the patients, and they'd be taking notes of what was going on in the hospital, and the psychiatrist would then write notes. Weird note-taking behaviour, and the inmates would say to the guys who had been stooged, "You're not one of us. What's going on? You're not one of us." And he'd go, "Shh, I'm just observing what's going on." So anyway, what happened was Rosenhan, he raised the alarm. None of them could get out. I think it took them months to get out, even when they said, "There's nothing wrong with us. We've just been sent by Rosenhan." They said, "Strange ideation." Yeah. So anyway, eventually he sprung them all out somehow. And the head of the Psychiatric Association in America was furious. And they said, "Right, send us anyone you like. We'll identify your stooges." So they did the experiment again. And the head of the AMA said, we've got all of the names. Here they are. And Rosenhan said, "Well, I haven't sent anyone."
Yeah,
Good on him.
They did,
The power of doing nothing.
they did another one with, they got a group of psychiatrists together and had a stooge present a series of supposed symptoms. And they didn't know what each other were diagnosis they were given. And it just varied all over the place. You know, so there is no test for any of these psychiatric illnesses. None. Zero. It's all in their heads. Whatever they think, they write these things down. And the main reason for their existence is so they can bill insurance companies. they got to have a diagnosis to bill insurance companies. So they have this meeting once every couple of years, and they all get together and they vote in these new diagnoses, and they vote them out too. Like they had.
I think there's a deeper level, though, don't you, to this? Sorry, Jenny, go on.
No, the DSM manual really is just a drug sales manual. That's all it is. It's how to sell drugs.
There's a deeper level to all this, because on the surface, you've got these psychiatrists who want to be looked at as though they're clever. They've got the status of being this professor or doctor. You've got the financial aspect from a pharmaceutical and the shareholders and the stock markets, etc., etc. But then on another level, someone knows that this is fundamentally wrong, and it's altering humans across the world. Not just the poor people who's suffering, but the families and everything else are under trauma as well. And that is done for a reason, because these things feed off.
But like all these corruptions,
energy.
Dom, all these corruptions, they play on our egos and then money.
Yes.
But like you said, deeper down, there's something else going on.
Well, who was the guy that came up with that? Sigmund Freud. He was the guy that first came up with the ego attached to sexuality, that then his nephew carried on, Edward Bernays, that then his nephew or great-nephew, Bernays, who owns Netflix, or Netflix, whatever you want to call it, he started Netflix up. So it's gone from 150 years of Sigmund Freud, Bernays, to his nephew Bernays, and we're still being fried with all this information and witchcraft from the same characters over and over.
And this is even
again.
more dangerous because it dumbs you down as a human being. I mean, you can't function normally pumped full of these drugs, and the antipsychotics are actually rotting their brains out. So they're slowly destroying them. And these people know this.
So before we finish, have we got I'd like to hear something from both of you on probably the links to mainstream media that you've that we blatantly see with that list there that you've just read out, that everything that you read out there is what's happening to everybody. Have you got anything else to add that you want to add before we finish? Because we're running up to 2 hours 16 so far. I'll let Jerry go first, then Jenny can...
You can visit the website Sherry and I started. There's tons of videotapes on this subject. We got testimonials from patients we've worked with. We've got current news. We've got programs. That's a live program that helps schizophrenics fight the voices. And we've got a book out that kind of covers all this that Sherry and I have written. Now Sherry,
book is that?
Yeah, I've read it as well.
Sherry heard voices like Jenny did when she was young. So Sherry was the first one that I was. Yeah. She turned out to be an engineer, but she was the first one that I could talk to.
So the book's called. Just hold it up again,
An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind. Breaking the spell of the ivory
It's
tower.
like a thriller, that is, Jerry.
Yeah, it's like a thriller and an educational book. Yeah,
really good.
It took us 2 years to write it.
Cool. I'll put all the links up in the descriptions because we'll probably get away with this on YouTube. I don't think we've said anything that's that out untoward with the thought police. What about you, Jenny? On a finishing note.
What can I say? I mean, pleasure to talk to everyone.
Can people get in touch with you? What sort of work are you doing currently?
Yeah, currently, I'm really doing more Zoom and Skype sessions, or if they happen to be local to me, which will be Suffolk in the next probably month, they can come and walk in my woods with me, and we can do walking therapy through the woods. So I've just bought a piece of woodland with 2 other people. So basically, I don't expressly work with schizophrenics, or at least let's put it another way, I haven't done yet. I did see 2 schizophrenics years ago, but I was out of my depth, which is why when I met Jerry a couple of years ago, I thought I need to know more. I need to know what's going on. Even though I've been through it myself, I couldn't sit and hold that. I just didn't know what was going on enough. And I think Jerry really did fill in the missing part for me. But people can reach me on openmindtherapy.co.uk, or I also mentor and supervise my colleagues on the openmindtherapist.com. So that's how people can reach me.
Right. And I'll put all those links in in the descriptions as well. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye.